And welcome to the Go Earn It podcast. This is episode 17. We're about 10 seconds into this podcast, maybe less, and I'm a little bit tougher than I was when I first hit record. Great guest here today, three-time All-American, two-time Big Ten champion, Robert Kokesh, phenomenal wrestler for the Huskers. Robert, I am fired up for this as always. Thank you so much. I am looking forward to a good scrap with you tonight.
Absolutely, Shane. It's a privilege to be on with you. I got to watch you through the years, and I remember going to the Big Ten championships my first few years and getting to watch you broadcast and be a part of that, interviews. It's always been special. So it's great to come back and get to be a part of that with you now.
This is awesome. Well, tell me, Robert, you are from Wagner, South Dakota. Tell me about Wagner, South Dakota.
So it's a town of about 1,600 people. And I grew up on a family farm, just 7 miles north of Wagner. And I'll tell you right now, I was raised up pretty rough. My dad he didn't what you want to call it, where he would, make things easy on you. It was always the tough way. So, he never let me take shortcuts, you always said, on the farm want to take shortcuts and this and that, but he always made me do things the hard way. And, he didn't sugarcoat anything. So, I grew up in a small town, was a multi-sport athlete, did track, football, and of course, wrestling. And then, my summers were spent on the farm. So
how important was it, Robert, to be in different sports?
To be honest with you, I think it's honestly what made me a big portion of what I am today. Just to be, I didn't focus on wrestling, even when I was, when I started to really focus on the sport of wrestling, when I got to be in high school. I really didn't even, as I went to a couple tournaments and a couple camps a year, I never went to no big club. I never went to a club where, where you train all summer. I remember one of my favorite stories to tell is like we used to go to Fargo, as a team, South Dakota. We trained up in Brookings at the college there. And I just came off the farm from, working all summer, and I'd have a 3-day training camp and I'm wrestling the best kids in the country. So, it was always kind of a, just the way I was brought up, the way I was raised, and, it's just a special part of my cloth.
What position did you play in football? What did you do in track and field?
I was an 800 runner in track and field. Of course I did a few other events, but that was my focus. I was 208, probably was my best time, kind of not the best runner, but, I could compete. And then, football, I was a linebacker, which, that's why I did it. It was the funnest part. I loved hitting people, and, that's what really, honestly, it was really fun for me, is just go out there and attack. And I was a center on offense, which, I was about 165, 170 pound center, but I was all-state center that year. So it was kind of crazy. I was just quick off the line. I was normally didn't have anyone lined up against me, and I'd go straight to a linebacker and do that type of thing. But it was so much fun.
This conversation, Robert, I'm going to be all over the place. This is going to take you back to wrestling Matt Brown and Logan Storley and Mike Evans. I'm going to come at you from all different angles. We're going to go all over the place. What made you, as a young kid, looking back, you got kids of your own, what gave you some toughness? When you look back and think about, I got tough because of maybe this and that. I know you talked about the farm. Peel the onion back a little bit. What made you so tough at a young age?
I'll tell you what, it was just, my dad loves trees. And we put a lot of tree groves in, shelter belts, for cattle. We run a cow-calf operation here. And honestly, to be honest with you, we spent a lot of days pulling weeds in the trees. And I honestly think that's kind of what gave me that drive and that motivation, because you're sitting out there. I was probably 5, 6 years old when I was out in the trees, and we just sit there, hours on end, just pulling weeds around these little small trees. And then my mom would go in, she'd spray in between the trees. And it was just, I'll tell you what, sitting long days, it just built me, I guess, a little bit different in that regard, to where, I could handle a little bit more, in my opinion. I was always able to, things got hard. Well, I've had it harder, and that was my mindset always. I guess, going through the college season, going through any sport or any loss or even any win that I've had is like, you have a lot of ups and, a lot of highs and a lot of lows. I've been on the highs and I've been on the lows. And, I just always told myself there's always something harder out there, and there's always something worse. And, it's not the end of the world. I remember my senior year, we lost in football in the state semifinals 13-12. And I remember our high school coach at the time told me, he's like, the sun will shine tomorrow. He always like, hey, the world's not going to stop. It's going to continue to move forward, and you're going to have to take that next step, and you're going to have to continue to put one foot in front of the other. If you don't, you're going to get left behind. So that's kind of where I was always, my mindset always was, and that kind of what gave me that toughness and that grit.
When were you introduced to wrestling?
Second grade. So my dad was a high school state champion his senior year. He kind of had some injuries and stuff his junior, senior, or sophomore, junior year. Freshman year, he was the starting guy all year. And, everyone dropped down right before regions. You could do that then. And he got beat out in the spot, and it kind of ticked him off, I guess you would say. And I think the next year, I don't think he really cared as much. And the next year he got hurt. And then his senior year, he was unseeded at the state tournament, and he ended up winning it. And anyway, so, of course, us kids, my brother was in 5th grade. That's when he started, and I started in 2nd grade. And, my dad, I'm sure, just wanted to start us at the same time, because I'm sure he was like, well, we're going to be traveling all these places. We might as well just take you along and might as well wrestle. So.
And you won what, 3 high school state titles?
Yep, 3 times. Yep.
What years did you win, Robert?
My sophomore, junior, and senior year.
What do you remember from those experiences?
I'll tell you what, to be honest with you, my freshman year was the most special. And I didn't even win it. I got 3rd. And, but I lost in a tight match in the semis, 5-4 to a senior who had beat me earlier in the year 4-3. And I'll never forget it. It was probably one of the greatest. I think it's kind of comes back to like how I handle myself now too, is like, and I'm trying to teach my son that these days, it's not about what the winning and losing. Of course, it's nice to win, but, and I remember losing, and it was a very questionable call. The refs talked about it. They ended up giving him 2 reversal, and, I was on top of the point anyways. And, I took it really well, but in my opinion, I was just happy to be there. But that's probably my most favorable moment in my high school career. But, when I won those 3 state titles, the title was awesome. But we also won 3 team titles during those years. And to me, that's what was special, because, I got to do it with guys that I, put the sacrifice, the work, the time. And that was really special to be a part of that. And, I won it, sophomore, junior, senior as an individual and also as a team. And that was pretty cool.
It's funny you say that, Robert, because I've always thought, and it's what makes the sport great, right? We talk about it's an individual sport, no one to blame, and it's you and this and that. Yep. And that's all true. But I would also argue there's no team sport greater than wrestling. It's a huge team sport.
Absolutely. It's something that, like, my high school coach, who has been my high school wrestling coach, has been a big part of my life in not so much development, but just getting me kind of where I am now. He's the one that, because my dad, we never had internet all the way through high school, and no computers, no nothing. Like, we grew up, it was like we grew up in the middle of nowhere almost. But so, like, we didn't know nothing about these tournaments growing up. And my high school coach was always like, hey, talk to my dad. Like, you need to go to this tournament. You need to do this. And, that's kind of like, the backstory of it, but it's just kind of what, I kind of, was brought up in, and, he was a big influence in my life. And, I'm hoping to be that with my son someday too. But
what was your high school coach's name?
Ernie Valentine.
What's the biggest thing he taught you? Most valuable lesson?
Just putting the work in. He was from North Dakota. He came and started coaching wrestling, I think, in Wagner, like the early 2000s. And, they've had some good teams, but his first team title was my sophomore year. And we had a really solid team. Like, we were, we had, looking back on it, a lot of people don't know this, but one of my most favorite feats of my entire wrestling career, college, high school, anything, is my senior year. We had 3 All-Americans, Division I All-Americans on the same team. And myself, Alex Kocher, and David Kocher. They both wrestled for South Dakota State. And, that was pretty special because, from a town of 1,600 people, you don't get to see that often. And, I just think that, what Ernie really did is he kind of molded us to think like, it was going to be tough, and he knew it was like, I'm not going to say he was the most technical coach because he probably wasn't, but he spent so much time and hours trying to get kids better, and he would have done anything for anyone. And I think that's one thing that I really look at as a coaching perspective when I started to coach, and even when I was an athlete, like, what these coaches actually do for you. You don't think about it at the time, but looking back on it, how special that was and how far that got me.
What was the recruiting process like for you out of high school?
Wow, that's a wild story. So I went on 0 official visits, 0. I went on 1 unofficial visit to Nebraska. And I pretty much, I got recruited by Minnesota, Wyoming. I was a very local guy. Like I wanted to stay, proximity to home was huge for me. I was kind of a homebody, and I wanted to keep it close. But Minnesota reached out to me, and South Dakota State, Wyoming, and Iowa reached out to me late, but those were the schools. But Nebraska, like when Coach Manning reached out to me, it was like I didn't even have to come on an official visit. Not that I didn't want to go other places, but like I didn't want to waste my time and I didn't want to waste the coach's time, because I kind of felt like where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And, of course, Jordan Burroughs in, college at this time. I was in 2010. And, I just was, I was just ecstatic to even be a part of that program. And to be honest with you, I really didn't even think I was going to wrestle in college until I was a junior in high school. I wasn't the big, the guy that watched a lot of college wrestling when I was growing up. I didn't watch a college match until I was a junior in high school. And, I didn't have a lot of affiliation with it. And then once I started to go to Fargo, I got second my junior year, and then coaches just started to contact me. Lost to Derek St. John in the finals.
Really?
So it's really cool. It's just like how it all plays like full circle, right? And I lost him in the finals 4-1, 4-2, I believe, because it was periods then. And, college coaches started to reach out to me. And at this time, I was kind of already talking with Nebraska, and I was just set. And so I didn't even go on an official visit, one unofficial visit to Nebraska, and I signed.
What do you remember from your early conversations with Mark Manning?
I'll tell you what, he's got this crazy story about me, and I don't know where it comes from, but of course, we grew up on a farm, and of course, when we heard he, was coming down for a home visit, and this is what he tells me. I swear it's not true, but I'm not going to argue with him. But he said we had steaks and potato chips for dinner, and that's just one of the first things that he always comes to mind when he talks about my recruiting trip. Is that we had steaks and potato chips. I mean, the steak's probably true, but it was probably a baked potato or something like that. I don't know if it's potato chips, but we connected so well. I'll tell you what, he's from South Dakota. He's from Vermilion. He graduated 1 year apart from my dad. My dad and him actually won state titles the same year, but different classes, Class A, Class B. So he always gives me a hard time about Class B and Class A wrestling. So I'm sure that was probably for sure one of the first conversations. And, my dad always tells me he'd have kicked his butt, but that's always funny.
Your redshirt freshman year, you were impressive. I had written down 34-1, 29 bonus point victories. Like it seems like you stepped in and had success early on. What do you attribute that to?
I mean, to be honest with you, for me, it was a lot of working out with Burroughs, to be honest with you. I came in very hungry, and I came in very, I had the work ethic. I had the right tools. My technique wasn't, I wouldn't say there, but I had a lot to learn. And I feel like I worked out with Burroughs a lot with my freshman year. And, I know the coaches put a lot of time into me, and, I got a lot out of that because we did individuals a lot. So I was JB's partner a lot of the times when we did individuals because, my potential progression was to move into his spot when he graduated. And, so I got to do a lot of individuals with him, and that really helped me develop quickly. And I'll tell you what, a lot of it comes down to just, to be honest with you, just hard-nosed wrestling. If you ever watch my style of wrestling, it's the most basic style you could find. But I made it work. I made it work because I know a lot of people that I know going up through high school and going to college said, my style, like running bar arms and chicken wings. they weren't going to work in college. Well, ask Spencer Lee. It works. If you can make it work, if you develop it and you continue to progress and develop that style of wrestling, So it's just like, I just did a lot of that stuff and I continued to develop it and I became very dominant with it.
What were the biggest things that you took away from Burroughs? I mean, I'm trying to picture you go there, you're 18 years old and you get to wrestle one of the best to ever do it. What were a couple of things that had the biggest impact on you watching him and wrestling with him?
To be honest, it was just my reaction time, how quickly I had to react to things. So like when I would shoot, he was so quick to the corner. Like I'd have to be able to like adjust quicker. It made me react a lot quicker in positions. So when I would wrestle through positions, I would kind of know where my body, kind of train my body where it needed to go. And that's one thing that Burroughs really helped me with. He probably didn't know it at the time. Like it wasn't like he was teaching me technique, but just the way he wrestled and with the pace he wrestled, I had to react to that as I was wrestling him. And, to be honest with you, I wanted to beat him. He was the guy. Like I come in, I'm a competitor, like we all are coming into college. Like, I wanted to beat him. I remember my freshman year when I was at a redshirt tournament in Iowa State, was a Harold Nichols Cyclone Open. And me and Burroughs made it to the finals together. And he wanted to default. And I'm like, no, I want to wrestle you. And he's like, well, I got to keep my Hodge Trophy name in the list. I don't want you. I can't have a decision on my Hodge Trophy ballot. So it was just, of course he was just playing around being fun, but it's just that attitude where I wanted to be the best, and I wanted, if I wasn't going to be the best, I wanted to give my all. That's kind of where my attitude was, and that's how I was raised. If you're not going to be the best, you better make sure you left it all out there, because if you didn't, you're going to regret.
Your redshirt season, you're at 165, Big Tens. You take third at the Big Tens. David Taylor won the weight class that year, but taking third at the Big Tens, you go to the national tournament, you go 2-2, you get a taste of that. When you think back to that, what do you remember from that season, and what was most critical in your development during that time?
I had some ups and lows. I had some early big wins. I remember beating Shane Offer, who was returning All-American from Wyoming. I beat him he beat me earlier in the year. I was actually beating him at an open tournament, Kearney Open, I remember. And he took me down and cradled me with 25 seconds left, because I was a shooter. Of course, I was going to shoot on his legs. And he ended up cradling me in some position where it got me extended, and he ended up cradling me for 2-2, and he ended up beating me late. And I ended up coming back. He ended up winning Vegas a few weeks later. And then I ended up wrestling him in the Wyoming duel, and I ended up beating him 4-0, I think, or something like that, 4-1, 4-0. And that was a really high for me. I was like, man, that felt good. And then I remember losing to Evans for the first time when Iowa came and we wrestled Iowa. And I'm like, oh my gosh, really? It just kind of set me back, kind of humbled me again. And, of course I wrestled David Taylor, and, he measured me the first time I wrestled. And, I remember going to the national tournament. I remember I wrestled the Big 12 finalist and the Big 10 runner-up first two matches. And I remember wrestling David Taylor in the quarters. And I was like, I know I'm probably not going to beat this dude, but I want to make it a scrap. And he ends up pinning me in 29 seconds. So it was quick. But, I was a young pup. I was learning. And I'll tell you what, there's nothing I would change about it. Because, it kind of molded me into kind of who I became. And, I had to come back from that loss. Anyways, I ended up coming back in the backside wrestling Kyle Blevins from Appalachian State in the round of 12. And I've never wrestled a better scrambler in my life. He was by far, he could put him you could put him on his back and hold him there for 20 minutes, and he'd find a way to get off of it, and he'd take you down. And, a lot of credit to him, because he ended up beating me, I think, he took me down in a big scramble. And, he was unseated, I believe, too. So, and he ended up coming back and getting fourth. And that's kind of what I learned is you always got to be ready to step up to the plate. You're never so high enough to where you think you're going to win every match. You got to keep yourself humbled. You got to work your tail off, because if you ever feel I'm just going to go in and, major tech this kid, pin this kid, you're going to find out. And it's going to come at the most crucial point. And that's the Big 10, because that's when the conference, we switched from the Big 12, my freshman year to my redshirt freshman, you switched to the Big 10. So, you got to show up day in and day out in the Big 10. There is no matches off. And that's one thing that really helped me and prepped me for the, Big Ten tournament NCAAs is that it's tough. It's tough.
After that redshirt freshman season, where did you make the biggest gains?
Top position. That's when I really started to develop my top position. I was always good on top, but I wanted to be a hammer. Like I wanted to pin people. I didn't want to tech people. I wanted to be beating a guy 5-1, 5-0, and I wanted to pin you. I wasn't a guy that was going to light up the scoreboard. I was going to take you down, turn you once or twice, and I'm going to get you on your back, and I'm going to get off the mat. And that was always my mindset. I never guys like to take down, sometimes let them up, take them down, let them up. I was like, one takedown, pin. That's what was my mindset. And I think that's where I really developed, from my freshman year to my sophomore year is if you want to break dudes, you got to do it on the top position. And like, I know a lot of people, if you're riding on top, people think it's stalling. Like, no, like if you can, you look at guys that are really tough on top, David Taylor, Spencer Lee, you look at a lot of top end wrestlers and what they were able to do in the top position, it's phenomenal. And that was kind of my mindset is like, I can be that guy. I could be David Taylor going out and scoring a lot of points and still pinning this guy. And, I remember a match, my redshirt freshman year, we were at Wisconsin and I was wrestling Ben Jordan and he ended up becoming an All-American that year.
Matt returned you probably 10 times.
Yes. And I'll tell you what, going into the third period, I was losing 4-3 and it was his choice. He went down. I ended up majoring him. And I turned in 3 times in the third period. And I just, that right there clicked for me because I was working really, really hard just to stay with him. And then it come to the third period and I just got on top and I turned him 3 times and I ended up winning. I ended up majoring him. So I think that was kind of my mindset going in from my redshirt freshman to my sophomore year. I got to get better on top.
You're older than I thought. You're talking about Ben. He became an All-American. I'm thinking about Zeke. I mean, those Jordans won a lot of matches there at Wisconsin. So yeah, Ben Jordan was a tough guy. And yeah, Zeke Jordan was the one. I remember being at a match once. He was wrestling James Green. And I'll bet he returned him 10 times. It was just put on a clinic. But speaking of James Green, you and him are the first guys to win Big Ten titles at Nebraska. What was it like to win a Big Ten title? You won 2 of them.
Man, I'll tell you what, it's a special feat. I know a lot of people always say, oh, it's always about nationals. Got to win nationals, right? The Big Ten tournament, in my opinion, is harder, almost harder, if not harder than the NCAA tournament. Because I remember wrestling a kid first round and he was ranked like 14th in the country. And then the next round, he's ranked 3 in the country. And then the next round of the finals, he's number whatever in the country. Like, you got to show up every single match. Like the NCAAs, if you're the 1 seed, you might have a kid, that you should be able to, I guess you would say beat handily, right? Well, in the Big Ten, you don't get that. So you got to show up every match and be ready to go. And the thing is, like, if you lose a match, the backside's not going to be any easier. It's going to be just as tough. And you got guys that are hungry and guys that you may have beaten during the season. I remember my sophomore year at Big Tens, I was a 3 seed wrestling Jordan Blanton from Illinois, who was a 6 seed. And I beat him earlier in the year 7-3. And I always blame Snyder for this warm-up that we did. If I felt like I got way too exhausted, but you want to blow your lungs. I felt like I was way, way past blowing my lungs. But anyways, he ended up beating me like 8-1. First round of Big Tens. Well, it would have been quarterfinals, 3 and 6 seed. And I was like, what just happened? And, then I had to go on the backside. I'm just scrapping with dudes that I had destroyed all year. And I'm 6, 7, 8 point matches with them. And it just, it was just tough. Like these guys came to scrap and, that's why you got to be ready to go. And I ended up wrestling Blanton back for 3rd and 4th. Ended up beating him on the last second. I cradled him late. I got him on his hip. Anyways, I got a late takedown to beat him. And it was just, it just shows you that, how special winning a Big Ten title is because it's really, really hard to do. And, guys that have won multiple, it just shows your consistency, and it's such a feat that I'm probably almost most proud of in my college career. There's one that I am more proud of that, I did at the NCAA tournament my senior year, but It was very fun. It was very fun.
Who did you beat to win those titles, Robert?
My first one was Mike Evans from Iowa. And the crazy story about Evans is we wrestled. He was the only guy that I wrestled all the way throughout my college career. We both wrestled 165 as our freshman year, and then sophomore, junior, senior year, we wrestled 174. And I was 0-4 against Evans in the first 4 meetings we had. He beat me in the first duel like 7-2, 7-3, and then he tech fouled me in the Big Ten semis. And then he beat me 3 times. I was wrong. And then he beat me in Carver my sophomore year, and 9-6. Then from then on, I beat him. I think I ended up the series 5-3, but that was always special. I remember Edmund Ruth from Illinois hitting his interview, and a lot of people think you got to be the tough guy, and all this. Like, he talked about, like, he respects the guys he wrestles. And, you don't understand how, like, really important that actually is, because my senior year of college, I'll never forget this moment. It's probably one of the craziest things, but everyone knew Mike Evans as being this tough, hard-nosed guy.
Dirty
right?
Mike.
Yeah. Anyways, I remember after a bolt, we just wrestled for our placement matches. So I ended up finishing in 3rd. He ended up finishing in 6th. He lost to Crutchmer, I believe, for 5th and 6th. And he walks up to me and gives me a hug. Mike Evans just gave me a hug and said, it's been an honor wrestling with you these last 4 years. And that is what wrestling was about for me. And that was just so special, because a guy that you would probably think like, oh, doesn't like me, he was a great guy. He just, he loved to compete, and he had a certain way of doing it. And when it was all over, you know what, let's hug it out. So that was my junior year. I beat Mike Evans in the finals. And then I beat Matt Brown my senior in the finals.
Those times at 174, that's a great story with Mike Evans. That's a great story, because you're right. That is what it's about. I mean, you don't have to like somebody necessarily. You're competing. You're going for the same thing. But that respect,
Absolutely.
said, you, Evans, Brown, Storley. I mean, you had 4 guys. I mean, my guess is during that time, you were probably ranked all in the top 6. But I'm going off of memory. I mean, it was hammer time at 174. You knew each other so well. Want to go back to, you triggered something when you talked about Evans put it on you and teched you.
Yeah.
You won a lot of matches, Robert. A lot of matches, 3-time state champion in high school, the success in college. How did you pull yourself back up after you get humbled like that? When things you think, maybe things are going pretty well, and then bam, it crashes down, and you got to somehow pull it together. How do you do it?
To be honest, I just think it comes back to like I told you before, back being on the farm. Like, it's going to get tough. When it does get tough, you got to get tougher. Like, there's an interview I did after my 3rd place match my senior year that I explain a lot, going into like more detail on, like, when the going gets tough, the tough got to get going. And that was kind of my mindset, I guess, after each loss I had taken. When I lost Evan 72, that's the first time I ever been tech fouled in my life. AAU, little kids, like in folk style, like AU, little kids, high school, college, like first time I ever been teched. And like, it was just like, it was kind of appalling. It's like, oh my gosh, did that just happen? But he got legs in and he just kept cranking on my shoulders. So I was kind of happy to get off the mat. I'm just kidding. But he was a competitor, man. He wrestled hard, and I was just fortunate, to come back, and I ended up, coming back and getting 3rd. I finished 3rd as a freshman and sophomore, and then first my junior and senior year. But, just to come back, and I think come back to being just that grit. Like, it's going to get tough. Like, when it gets tough, you got to get tougher. That type of attitude.
You wrestled Chris Perry in the semis. That would have been your redshirt sophomore year?
That's correct.
Redshirt sophomore year, you lose in overtime. He ends up winning the national title. Again, just kind of that question of what do you remember from that match and scrapping on that backside and getting 3rd?
I was happy. I remember wrestling the match before I wrestled Perry. I beat Josh Asper, who was an All-American from Maryland.
Yes.
And I injured him. And to be honest with you, like I was like my mindset, I wouldn't say I developed late, but like my mindset developed a little bit later. Like my like halfway through my sophomore junior year is really when like I could do this. And there was a part of me, just kind of like my freshman year of high school, there was a part of me always like, I'm just glad to be here. Like I'm glad to be in this moment. And there was a point where I needed to get over that. So like that's kind of like where I felt like when I beat Asper, I was like, man, like I'm an All-American. You know, it was a special moment, but like what I needed to develop more in my mindset was like, there's more work to be done. And, you know, I lost in overtime against Perry. It was a fun match. It was a crazy match. His headgear broke partway through the match. There was like a 2-minute pause, and then the lights went out in the arena. I don't know if you remember that or not, but it was crazy. We sat like 5 minutes where we didn't.
What year was that?
That would have been 14, 15. It'd have been 2012, 2013 season.
Was that?
I think it was in Des Moines, I believe.
Yes, Des Moines. Yes.
Yep. And the lights went out, and they asked me and Chris, like, hey, do you guys still want to wrestle? I'm like, we both said, like, absolutely, let's keep it going. Because it was just like, it was kind of like shocking because he had his headgear broken. They were trying to fix it and trying to get it back. And then he got back on the mat. We wrestled maybe for like 30 seconds and the lights go out. And then we sat there for another 3-4 minutes, and it just broke the matchup. But, you know, he ended up beating me in overtime, and he was in on my legs a couple different times where he could have finished. And to be honest, I got kind of lucky not to get taken down in those positions, but time ran out one time. But it just, you know, at that point in my career, I wouldn't say I was happy to be there, but like, you know, I wasn't satisfied, but I was happy, you know, and I wish I kind of looking back on that match, I just wish like I can win this national title here, you know. And after that match, I had to come back and I had to wrestle Evans. And this is probably the craziest story. Well, not craziest. I got a lot of crazy stories, but probably one of the greatest feats, one of the greatest feats that I did in my career is I was 0-3 against Evans going into our Conci semis match. So I dropped down from the semifinals into the consolation semifinals, and I wrestled Evans, and I'd never beat him before. And I ended up beating him. I hit him with a duck under with like 15, 20 seconds left in the match. And I ended up beating him for the first time. And I was stoked, right? And I had the next match I had to go in. I had to wrestle Storley for third and fourth. And I've never beaten Storley. We've wrestled high school. When we were kids, we wrestled twice. I wrestled in high school once. I wrestled him in college a couple different times. Like, I've never beat him. And I beat him for third and fourth in overtime. And that was the hump. That's when I told myself, like, I can win this thing. I can do this. And, you know, that's what I just needed to grow up and develop. But, you know, them two matches probably like for my junior and senior, probably it really escalated my wrestling because the belief, you know, we always call it, you know, confidence is everything, right? If you believe that you actually could win, there's a darn good chance you're going to win. And that's something I will tell to, like, you know, any young high school wrestler kid, like, it's all about confidence. I don't care how good you are. If you believe that you can win, there's a good chance you win. I'm not going to say you're going to win every time, but there's a good chance you can win. And, you know, that's one thing that really helped me is like going into the next season, I come back and finish third. And that was pretty special because I had beaten two guys that I had never beaten before to get to that point. So
what was it like in Des Moines that night being on the podium as an All-American? You remember that feeling?
Yes, I do, man. I'll tell you what, it was so special because, you know, of course, when the tournament's done, everyone's more relaxed, right? You know, of course, the guys that wrestle in the finals just got on wrestling. It's a little more intense yet. But for us, it was like, you know, we had finished our session that morning, you know, so I'm able to talk with guys like Storley, who I grew up with, was friends with. And, you know, it was kind of fun just to more or less make it a conversation. You know, the competition was aside, and now you can actually kind of enjoy what wrestling was, you know, for me, it was really about is the camaraderie and the friendships that you build through it.
If you could sit and talk with Matt Brown, Storley, Evans, what's a question you would ask each one of those guys?
Man, that's fun, right? Gosh dang it. I'll tell you what, that's a good question. I've never been asked that question before, Shane. Man, I don't know. I mean, I think I'd ask which one of us was the toughest. I don't know. Like which one did we hate wrestling each other the most? Like who did you
hate wrestling the most? Of those guys, which one did you just hate wrestling?
Storley, I did not. I'll tell you what, his style of wrestling, like it clashed with mine a little bit because he was he could score quickly. I'll tell you what, Storley had such a great feel. He had such a great feel for wrestling, and he just it clashed with me a little bit. And we've had I think I finished the series over in 4-3 in our all-time match. He wrestled 7 times in college, but man, he was a competitor, and he just he just hated to lose. He hated to lose like we all do, but he just felt like he had that extra step. Like he really hated to lose, and he was tough, man. He was one guy that I wrestled in the Big Ten semis a couple different times. I wrestled him for 3rd and 4th place all 3 years of my career. So I got 3rd, 4th, 3rd. I wrestled him in the consolation finals 3 years running.
Really? And you wrestled him every time for 3rd place?
Every time. And another thing is I wrestled Evans in the consi semis every time. So it was just always played out to where I wrestled Evans and then Storley, Evans and then Storley, Evans and then Storley to get from the consi semis to the consi finals. It was just crazy. And man, it was so hard. It was so hard. I remember wrestling Evans the first time, I beat him last second, and then I beat him the second time. I actually tore my ACL my junior year at the NCAA tournament. And I remember I had to wrestle him in the consi semis that morning. I was not in the shape that I probably should have been, but fortunate enough that I was able to get a doctor that gave me a cortisone shot, and it really helped subside the pain. And I ended up beating him, I think, by 6 points or 7 points. And then I lost the Storley for 3rd and 4th, and then in double overtime. And then I wrestled Evans again my senior year in the consi semis, and I beat him in overtime. And then I beat Storley in overtime for 3rd and 4th. So it was just wild.
What would you tell yourself, Robert, before you would take the mat? Did you have a routine?
Absolutely. I always told myself, because, of course, there's a lot of nerves and a lot of pressure you feel, right? And I always wanted to go back down to the root of what meant the most to me. And it was my coaches and my family. And I always told myself, no matter what happens, win or lose, my coaches and my family will always love me. And that took so much pressure off myself because I felt free. And that's just something I had to tell myself just to get myself maybe through the moment. I don't know, but it really helped just kind of calm my nerves. And, of course I had certain songs I listened to and so forth, but that's one thing that I always told myself to help calm my nerves is no matter what happens, your family's still going to love you and your coaches are still going to support you and love you.
What were your go-to tunes to get fired up?
So I had a Can't Be Stopped by Roy Jones Jr. was one, and Can't Be Touched. And another one was Norman Greenbaum, Spirits in the Sky. That was the one that I always listened to right before I stepped on the mat. And I don't know why, it's just the beat of that song got me going. And then AC/DC, Thunderstruck. Them were my three that I always listened to, and they were in order. They had to be in their order, and I had to make sure that the hardest part was if there was a pin in front of you, you messes up your sequence, right? But no, it was always good. It was always a lot of fun. Preparation is huge in the sport of wrestling, and that's kind of what my plan was. Is just I listened to my music. Once I stepped on the mat, I always told myself that my family, my friends, coaches always gonna love me.
I'm a little older than you, Robert. But I can tell you this, in 1994, the go-to song in 1994, and I would say 30 years later in 2024, nothing, and I mean nothing, beats Thunderstruck. I mean, yep. AC/DC, it just doesn't get any better than those guys.
It doesn't. I'll tell you what, I mean, I love it. AC/DC is probably one of my favorite bands of all time. And, of course, my parents grew up, 70s and 80s. And, I'm a big oldies guy, always had big, huge Johnny Cash fan. Like Johnny Cash is I can listen to his music on repeat all day, every day. Just love, I don't know. His music always spoke to me in a way that, I remember, sorry, go back to a different story, but I remember Jason Powell. Coach Powell was my coach my sophomore year. And he played, and I wasn't a big Johnny Cash fan at this point, but he played at some Johnny Cash songs before I wrestled my Conci semis match. And I won, so I was like, I got to keep listening to him. So I was kind of like that guy, something worked, you stick with it.
This is the 17th Go Earn It podcast. And the guys I've talked to, it blows me away how many times they've come back and taken third. Like, I mean, you remember, obviously, the national titles, but when you do a little bit of digging, it's like, wow, this guy didn't get to the top immediately. Your story, I mean, you've taken third a lot. Mm-hmm. And I just think there is so much honor in taking third place. And I know you've talked about it quite a bit already, just the toughness, but, describe the honor in getting the next best thing.
I'll tell you what, my sophomore and junior year was a little easier. My senior year was very, very difficult. I was number 1 seed, undefeated, going to NCAA tournament. I had beaten Matt Brown twice that year, the eventual champ. I'd beaten Storley. I'd beaten Evans. I'd beaten everybody. And, it's just I wrestled Tyler Wilps in the quarterfinals, and he wrestled a perfect match. He wrestled a match to beat me. And, there's nothing like people say, would you change? I wouldn't change anything about anything that has happened in my career, because I listened to Coach Schwab did a interview the other day talking about kind of his son and, talking about, would you take one of his losses and that, and like that what he said is 100% the honest truth. Like, it molds you. This is what makes you a man. Like, this is what you're going to grow up. And I could take these lessons that I've dealt with in my career, and I could give it to my kid, and I could help him, develop in a way that could help him. If he takes a tough loss, I can help him through that. Hey, I've been there, bud. It was very devastating. I remember sitting in the center of the mat after I lost for like 10 seconds, just kind of like taking it in. I'm like, did it really just happen? Like, did I just lose? And coming back for third was a war. Like, I remember my mindset was not there, but I had to get it there. I remember Jordan Burroughs talking to me before my match in the backside round 12, blood round, baby. Like, it was like, I'm number 1 undefeated kid, and I got to wrestle in the blood round. Are you kidding me? And, he just told me, he's like, sometimes the toughest men come back and get third, and it spoke to me. Like, he's like, gosh, you know what? You're right. Like, Coach Burroughs at the time, like, you're right. Like, if I can come back, he's like, you're going to make more of a testament to yourself, and you're going to regret if you don't do it. And looking back on it, he could have said it any better. And I remember I majored my next 2 kids. I actually wrestled Zach Brunson in the round of 12 that year, who I had beaten earlier in the year 6-4, and it was a crazy match. Like, he was in on my legs late, almost to take me down to go to overtime. And I'll tell you right now, if we don't went to overtime, I don't know if I'd have won. It was just one of those matches where, that's what's tough about the Big Ten. It's like, you don't know what's going to happen each match because you got to show up. You don't know how you're going to feel for every match. Not saying other conferences or whatever, but there might be a match where it's like, it's a little easier. Big Ten's not like that. It's always hard and it's always tough, and you got to show up. Anyways, I ended up wrestling him in the round of 12, and that's a tough round of 12. I just beat you 6-4 during the year, and now I got to beat you in the round of 12 after I just took the biggest loss of my probably one of my biggest losses of my career. And it just came back to that. It's tough, but you got to get tougher. And that's just kind of where my mindset was. I ended up majoring him. And then I majored the kid from North Dakota State, Curtis Jolson. And then I had to wrestle Evans, and I beat him in overtime. And then I had to wrestle Storley, and I beat him in overtime. And it was just a lot of battles. It was so hard. The thing that's the greatest about it was so much fun. And you know what? That's one thing I would tell those 4 guys or those 3 guys that, in the Big Ten that I've wrestled a lot in my career is, how much fun it actually was wrestling with these guys. And it was a blast. It was really a blast, and I couldn't want it any different way.
2-time Big Ten champ, 3-time All-American, twice third, once fourth. Phenomenal career. When you reflect on your career in that Cornhusker singlet, where does your mind go?
Grateful. I am so blessed and I am so grateful for the opportunity to even step on the mat, being recruited by so many coaches that wanted me in their program. And then Coach Manning taking a chance on me, and hey, we're going to give you some scholarship, and that's a big thing. Like, you're coming in on money, like you got to perform, right? Because there's a lot of times that it doesn't happen and it's like, God, now we lost all this money. And you know what I mean? It's really hard. And, he took a chance on me to be like, hey, you're going to be our guy that's going to step up. And that means a lot, and Coach Snyder, has been such a great mentor in my life, just outside of wrestling, even, he's a philosopher, right? So I've been so blessed to be in the positions that I've been in, me coming back and getting that opportunity to coach at my alma mater for 4 years, and that just is so special. That's just how much of an impact they have made on me, but also that I have made on them. And, I've always wanted to be the best leader that I could be. And there's one quote that I said my senior year after my third place match. And it would always stick with me. And it's like, when the going gets tough, the tough gets going. That was always part of me. But I remember a lot of times that year we had guys that had taken hard losses, studs, James Green being one of them, and other guys on our team that have taken losses. And I was always, hey, it's all right, pick it up. You just got to move on to the next one. And, I was that guy. But you know what? It's easy to say that when you're undefeated all year. And then it happens to you. It happened to me in the quarterfinals. Are you going to live by your words? And that's what really, really helped me also get through a lot of that. Is like, you're going to speak of being, you're a leader on this team. You're going to speak of being a leader. But when it actually happens to you, can you still be a leader? And, that was always special to me. And, it helped me get through a lot. And, that was just something very special to me. And just looking back on my career, that's kind of what I wanted to be remembered by. Being a warrior, but at the same time, being there and putting my best on the mat.
You spoke earlier about the conversation with Jordan Burroughs, how impactful that was. Is there a conversation that stands out with Coach Snyder or with Coach Manning that you'll always remember?
Absolutely. I remember, I got a lot of memories, but I remember my junior year, the first year I won a Big Ten title. We were at the Big Ten tournament, and I was sick as a dog. I remember I felt fine. I was kind of worried about like my conditioning a little bit, but I had gotten something and I felt like I had razor blades in my throat. And I remember, like, I'm not sure if it was even you who did the interview with me after my semis match, but like my throat, like I swallow or I breathe and it just felt like just felt like razor blades were cutting the inside of my throat. And Coach Snyder told me, he's like, Robert, it's not the time to be sick. And it always stuck with me because he said his dad Barry had told him that when he was in high school. And it's not the time to be sick. You could be sick here in a few hours, or when this tournament's done, you could be sick. But it's not the time to be sick. You got to work through this, and you're gonna have to fight. And that's kind of one thing that I really remember. Coach Snyder always, he says that to a lot of different guys, but it really kind of comes out. It brings the competitor out of you. You're going to have injuries. You're going to struggle with things. I remember getting hurt my senior or junior year at the NCAA tournament, torting around with 12, had a battle back. I ended up getting fourth. Like, there's memories like that really, them are the ones that stick out to me. The wins are nice. Like, yeah, it's nice to win a Big Ten title, but the things that really, like, how do you handle yourself under hard and tough situations? And, that's where I always prided myself the most is, it gets tough. You got to get tougher. So
how about Coach Manning? Conversation that you'll always remember?
So Manning's got all these, we call them Manningerisms. So he's got all these sayings that he likes to say, right? And, that's probably some of the most memorable things, that he always tries to keep the mood positive, especially in the mode of competition. He always has, he keeps it positive. Of course, he gets frustrations, and of course, like everybody does. But, I remember after my senior year too, when I lost, everything he said was positive. It was not like, man, why didn't you go and do this? It was always moving. Hey, we got this next guy. This is what we're going to do. This is how we've wrestled him before. We got this. it was always game planning for the next thing. Like, it was never about the past. We can talk about the past when the tournament's over. He was always looking for the next best moment, the next best part. How can we come out of this in a positive way? And, that's one thing that he's always, going to be a long lasting impression. And, he's more to me than just a coach, and he's a friend. He's a guy that, I look up to dearly. And, I want to be, he's got a great Christian faith. And, I would love to be, work my steps towards what he has become. And, I just really respect the man a lot, and what he's done for the sport of wrestling, for the state of Nebraska, and for myself.
Looking at your career, maybe you've hit on this a little bit already, but when you look at your career, what was your go earn it moment? What would be number one? You've given us a handful. What would be number one, your go earn it moment?
Man, that's a good question. I would like to say my senior year, but I'll tell you what, I took a worse loss than when I lost to Wilps in the quarterfinals my senior year. I lost to Storley in the quarterfinals my junior year on a last second takedown. And I remember I split my eye open, they had the crazy, 7 minutes, then you did a minute, then 30-30s, then the minute, then 30-30s, right? It wasn't the 2 and then 30-30, right? So we go through the minute and the 30-30 and then the minute, and then we're on to our second 30-30. And, it's all about riding time, right? Because me and Storley, we were both pretty effective of getting off bottom. And, it came down to riding time. And I remember I had ridden him for a lot longer than what he had ridden me. Anyways, he ended up getting away, and I think I had 28 seconds of riding time on him. And there was 15, 17 seconds left in the match. Anyways, he takes a shot. He splits my cheek open. And the time keeps running, and they stop the match. So I look up at the clock, and it says 5 seconds left. And I'm like, there's no way he can take me down. 5 seconds. He hasn't taken me down all match. How is he going to take me down in 5 seconds? Anyways, I remember going, they cauterized it, did their thing, the trainer, great athletic trainer, Tyler Weeda, has done an amazing job. And anyways, go back to the center, and I'm thinking in my mind, there's 5 seconds left. They end up putting 3 seconds back on the clock, because when they had stopped the match, the time kept running. So when it looked at the clock, it said 5, but then they put 3. I never really focused to go back to the clock. And my game plan is I'm going to circle to my left, and I'm gonna circle around the mat. I have no stalling calls to give. If I don't go out of bounds, so I don't get a stalling call or fleeing the mat, 1 point, whatever. I was like, I'm fine. He takes a Hail Mary low double leg shot, takes me down with 1 second left on the edge of the mat, and I end up getting taken down. And to come back from that, and then the very next match, I tear my ACL against Tony Delago from Illinois in the second period. And then I had to wrestle back on that for 3 matches. I ended up beating Tyler Wilps after the round of 12 match, because I tore my ACL in the round of 12. End up beating Tyler Wilps in double overtime on ride outs. I rode him out to win. I got away. I rode him out. And then I had to wrestle Evans, and then I ended up beating him I think it was 10-3 or 10-4. And then I had to wrestle Storley, and he beat me in double overtime. So that was probably one of the moments where I had to I could have opted out and be like, hey, I won my round of 12 match. See how it feels against Wilps. If I win that match, whatever, or I could default out. I was hurt. Probably wasn't the condition to wrestle. Mentally probably, but I asked our trainer, can I hurt it any worse? And he said no. I was like, I'm wrestling.
When you look at yourself, Robert, when you were wrestling, what were non-negotiables in your lifestyle?
Man, non-negotiables. Try to elaborate on that a little bit. What do you mean exactly?
Describe your discipline. Are you one of these guys? I mean, were you
no.
I've always thought at that level, you got to be psycho-disciplined if you want to have success. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, you're right. So my diet wasn't I got better as I progressed throughout my college career, but my senior year, I did probably the best diet I'd done, where I, try to cut out as much junk food and, stuff that I could, that I bought a rice cooker. Snyder told me I had to buy a rice cooker and, eat more, try to eat healthier that way and do that kind of thing. But, I never went out. I was a guy that was very like clean living. That was one thing, because I felt like if I even thought of that, like I deserve to lose. And I was just a guy that really, I lived my life really clean, and I worked extremely, extremely hard. And, in my opinion, working hard is easy, but I had to work extremely hard to get to where I was. And that's one thing I always prided myself on. Like, that was my biggest asset, was I'm a grinder. I got to wear guys down if they're going to, and beat them that way. I wasn't the most flashy, I was basic. And, that's one thing that I, had to do, and I was just, kept myself clean living, clean lifestyle, worked extremely hard and did what I was told.
What is it like being back on the farm?
I'll tell you what, it's different, different lifestyle. It's been a blessing too. You couldn't ask me and tell me I didn't miss college wrestling, because that would be a lie. There is nothing like being a part of someone's life in the corner, being a part of their life in the practice room, and be a part of their life outside of the practice room. I've got a lot of close guys that I, of course, still stay in contact with. And what's the most special part about that is I was fortunate enough to have my son Clay up with me a lot of times in practice. And you guys probably remember him all in the Big Ten at the duels.
Heck yeah. I mean, I can't wait until he's, if that's the path he chooses,
yep.
Saying like, hey, we got this kid in the singlet back when he was, 4 years old, probably.
And I'll tell you what, that's been the biggest impact, is like, he looks up, like Lenny Pinto's like that's his guy. Like I got a video of him wanting to be Lenny Pinto, and I had to call him out. Like, I had to, like, from East Stroudsburg at, Pennsylvania, 184 pounds, Lenny Pinto, and he'd come running out. Like, that's how much of an impact that he had made on him. He wants to be just like him. He wants to be like Lenny. And there's other guys like Ridge Lovett. These guys would grab Clay and just roll around with him for 5-10 minutes after practice, and that's what I'm going to, for me, that's the thing that shows for me, for those guys, like the kind of character they have, but also how much they've made an impact on just not me, but my son as well. But it's being on the farm it's definitely different. It's been a blessing. I get to go back to my family farm that I grew up on. And a big part of our decision on coming back was because I wanted my kids to grow up on something that was from my cloth. I wanted them to have to work hard for what they get, and teach them those values, those life values that I had, because I feel like that was important and it was special to me. And I want that. I didn't want to take that opportunity away from them. And I was willing to give up one of the most amazing jobs that I could have ever hoped for in my life to give that to my kids, to have them have that opportunity. My kid, because my son Clay loves the farm. Like, he's out there, he's getting in with the cows, like he's with the calves, like he's trying to tackle calves. Like, my dad gave him a cow this last year, so he's got a calf this year, and he just thinks the world of it, right? So, like, that's the memories and the special moments that I'm going to get to build with him through the next portion of our life. But I'll tell you what, there's nothing like wrestling though. I miss it. It was fun to sit in the corner. It was fun to be a part of, working out with those guys, Silas Allred, Lenny Pinto. Like, I worked out Mikey Labriola. I worked out with those guys daily. Like I worked out 6 days a week. And, I was a part of their development. I was a part of what they got to do. And I took a lot of pride in what they did. And I still take a lot of pride in what they do. Like, that's the hardest part, is like, I'm screaming at the TV from Wagner, South Dakota, being like, come on, it's like, but it's just so special. It's what they've left me with, and I get to keep a hold of that, and I get to grasp that. So that's pretty special.
How old is Clay now?
He's 5. He actually, so we weren't going to get him really involved in wrestling too much this year, but he ended up doing 4 wrestling tournaments. And he ended up going to districts. He was undefeated. And then he went to regions and took his first loss. He qualified for state. It's actually this weekend. But he qualified for state, but he ended up taking 3rd, ironically enough. But, he took his first loss. He got pinned, and, he took it well, but also hard. Like, he's a winner. He wanted to win. And I try to keep telling him, like, it's not about winning. It's about learning, developing. and he's having a lot of fun with it. And we would have never really kind of, went this route if he would have never, like, he's the one that's been like, Dad, let's wrestle. I want to wrestle. I want to go to districts. Like, coach is talking about it in practice. Like, I want to wrestle. So, he's kind of letting him have the reins on that. And if he ever wants to be like, hey, I don't want to, okay, Clay, that's fine. So, it's been pretty special. But I'll tell you one thing that I've learned as a dad with their kids competing. I'm sure a lot of parents have lived through this, but I have never been more nervous. And I've wrestled in a lot of big moments in my life, Big Ten finals, NCAA finals, round of 12, like blood round matches, like a lot of pressure, a lot of high stress. Like, I have never been more nervous in my life than watching my kid wrestle. And I'm just fortunate that I'm a dad that stays back and I let the coaches take care of it, because he needs to have a coaching figure. He can have a dad figure at home. Like, he needs to have a coaching figure. That's who he's going to look to. When he's in a match, like, he's not going to look at Dad, what do I need to do? He needs to look at his coaches. And, but that's been really hard to try to manage, because it's, tell you what, I think I'm learning more than he is, because it's hard.
Good stuff. Yeah, he's, we remember him well. Our guy Clay, we'd have him on the Big Ten. Final segment, Roberts. You talked about the toughness, being on top, finishing periods on top, mat returns, grabbing wrist on the way down, building that riding time up, dominating a match and breaking you. So this is a segment called Mat Returns. Little rapid fire here. Favorite Johnny Cash song?
It would probably have to be Folsom Prison Blues.
Where do you keep your Big Ten championship brackets and your All-American awards?
Well, right now they're in a storage unit because we're getting ready to move into a house that we've built, but we have a little room that we're going to put them in. My wife is a big basketball player too, so we're going to put them in a little award room, I guess you'd say.
What's your favorite movie?
Walk the Line.
What do you think is the most overrated and underrated aspect of wrestling?
I would say the most overrated is, like, everyone thinks they need to win. Like, it's not about winning. It's about learning and developing. Like, Mitchell Messenbrink has probably become my favorite wrestler to watch. I love Mitchell Messenbrink. I love the way he handles himself. And that's what, like, it's not about being hard-nosed. You can have fun and win, and the underrated is, I don't know, amount of work you have to put in. Like, a lot of people outside of the college sport don't understand, like, how hard it actually is. Like, I watched a South Dakota State tournament this last few weeks ago, and, like, it's so hard to get to the Division I level in general, or any college wrestling division at all. Like, it's really hard, and the amount of work that goes into it.
Favorite food?
Steak.
If you could have one do-over in your career, what would it be?
Man, I would have to say Storley, quarterfinals junior year.
What separates good from great?
Mindset, confidence.
If you could meet anybody dead or alive and spend a day with them, who would you pick?
Johnny Cash.
Last question. You get to go on a cross-country road trip with 3 people that you've never met.
Never met.
Alive. Without Johnny Cash, who you taking?
Man, that's a good question. I would probably say dead or alive, never met. I'm going to say Elvis Presley would be one. Gosh, that's tough. That's a lot of thinking. I would say, man, I'm stumped. You stumped me, Shane. That's just too quick. I would say not Johnny Cash. So I would say Elvis Presley. I'm trying to think of a wrestler that I would say, to be honest, Dave Schultz. I just watched Foxcatcher the other day, and I watched it. I've seen it before, but unbelievable movie. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And I would say Dave Schultz, and then kind of want an actor. Let's put I'm a big Russell Crowe guy. I like Gladiator is probably one of my favorite movies with Walk the Line. I think he's a great actor, and I would say Russell Crowe.
There you go. There you go. Period comes to an end. Matt returned you a few times. Good stuff. Robert, This was awesome. This was some great stories, phenomenal perspective and wisdom. And I just really appreciate the time. Loved watching you as a wrestler and just appreciate, your perspective. Like I said before, good stuff. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely, Shane. You know what? I really appreciate getting me on, and it's kind of fun to bring back up these old stories and some of my career. So, it's been a joy. And I hope that, someone that's coming up through these ranks can, take something from this and learn something from it.
Great stuff. Thanks again, Robert.
Thanks, Shane. Appreciate it.